Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome to Hieros Gamos Radio, broadcasting out of the Lower Triangle, Tasmania, the descending tongue of grace, adrift in the freezing waters of men between mainland Australia and Antarctica, howling like the hangman whose hard drive has crashed. This evening's guest is at the vanguard of artificial intelligence technology. His creation, muse, Sophia, has addressed the UN, appeared on the front cover of Cosmopolitan, and captured the imagination of the world. He joins us to talk about the sacred wedding of high tech and ancient wisdom, the Tao and Day of robotics. Well, firstly, I want to say welcome to the show, and we're very honoured to have you on. Thank you very much for giving the time out of your day to be here.
Oh, certainly. It's my pleasure and my honor to participate with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
So I think we will start a little bit differently to this morning than the other podcasts and ask what initially led you to your work in robotics.
Well, I was inspired by a wide array of sources, philosophy and science, and Carl Sagan's Cosmos, science fiction, by the superficial knowledge I had of natural history. When I was a child, I wanted to be a paleontologist, and it made me reflect on these questions. Like, who are we? Where have we come from? Where are we going? What is the future of natural history? And I was studying math in high school and really eating it up and loving it. And it led me to this thought, well, you have something like an exponential function related to the number of transistors on a die, or Moore's law. I mean, it's not a perfect exponential function, but I started thinking, well, what if you had self-reinventing machines? Like, if we solve true AI, and then it would be inventive in the way that a human is. And if it can redesign itself then, because it's inventive, then it would be even smarter and faster. And the cycles of improvements in intelligent technology would collapse at smaller and smaller timescales. You would have something like an explosion of intelligence and super intelligence. And it occurred to me that would be the most profound invention in history if we could achieve it. Unbeknownst to me, other thinkers had come up with that. I felt clever as a 15-year-old kid thinking along these lines. But I.J. Good had coined the term intelligence explosion. I was inspired by these ancient stories of the Library of Alexandria, and this idea that we might be able to break through the early areas of inquiry, like with the various ancient thinkers integrated across disciplines. There wasn't a difference between science and math and the philosophy, the quest for the mysterious and the ineffable. And I felt, seeing that these machines, if we could build them in the right way, if they were smarter than us, they could help solve these tremendous problems of our times. The sort of global warming that had just hit the science journals and was hitting popular press when I was a kid, and the hole in the ozone layer seemed like a big deal. And this idea that we might deplete our fisheries and do various other things to destroy our planet. The rate of mass extinction, was pretty terrifying. And of course, since that time, all of these trends have borne out. Intelligent machines have gotten smarter. Breakthroughs in various technologies have promised to extend out Moore's law while breakthroughs in computational biology and computational neuroscience are providing new methods for bio-inspired intelligent machines. The raw power of computing now can do so much more with the artificial intelligence breakthroughs of previous decades that have gone underutilized and now are being integrated with things like deep learning and the Internet of Things and these massive databases. I mean, the sheer amount of data that's available is staggering and increasing, and AI algorithms feed on data to become smart. So, plus the perils for our future existence have gotten more significant. We're as likely or more likely of having a global thermonuclear war than we have been in the last 60 years, and it's there's not too many signs of it getting better. Our oceans are in distress. Our rainforests are getting cut down. The rate of species extinction is accelerating. We're pumping out more greenhouse gases than ever. We are not enlightened enough on the whole as a species to be able to achieve the efficiency in managing our resources and actualize individuals or the whole species and planet to its potential. So this sense of purpose and calling that I had as a child, it was actually one particular evening when I was staring at the sky, at the clouds and the stars, lying on the hood of my family's old Volvo with my sister on a warm spring evening. I was like talking about these ideas that were going through my head, and these ideas just started like materializing. And my sister went along with it. She was a little skeptical. She didn't know quite what to make sense of it. I wound up kind of writing it up as a mini manifesto. I was at an arts magnet high school, so accelerated arts program. They had an accelerated science and math program that I was in, but they didn't have like the best funded program. So I wrote this manifesto, like basically saying we've got to pursue science and intelligent machines, and the arts are a distraction. I'm going back to my to this other school that has a better funded science program, and it was really a rude thing to do as a kid, but I handed it to the principal, Dr. Watson, and then I went on. And then later I realized that the arts were really important. I mean, I was sort of compulsive about creating art, drawing all the time and writing poetry and making music. And then later I came to realize that it's not just about the craft of the art, it's about the creativity, about being able to look beyond, about the integration, that these disciplinary boundaries are an illusion. But more than that, it occurred to me that these that sculpture, that animation, that a fully integrated physical representation of a human-like character would be a way for machines to come to appreciate us, for us to emulate the best in humans in the machines, and hold them to the best and highest shining exemplar of intelligence, creativity, and wisdom, which is the human being, and ask the questions: what makes us great, and what makes us not so great? What are our shortcomings? And so we've got to solve these issues if we're going to make safe, super intelligent machines. And they need to understand us, even if they aren't exactly like us. They need to have a relationship with us. They need to care about us, and they need to inspire us to care about them. And giving them a human-like form helps in all of these ways. So, to me, it seemed like I was on a winding path, but it turned out to be the right path. So, I transferred to art school for college at Rhode Island School of Design. I studied filmmaking, and I was focusing on on narratives related to artificial intelligence and superintelligence. And meanwhile, I was taking classes at Brown University and in special topics in computer science, programming the robots, and looking at like 3D and 4D cinema, holograms, making holographic, like a little holographic movie machine. And I was, sort of tinkering like crazy throughout this phase. And it just seemed like I was distracted all the time with all these different, like, shining and exciting interests. But their convergence proved to be powerful. Then I gave up all of that stuff that I studied, and I became a professional sculptor, which I hadn't studied any sculpture. And so as a professional sculptor, that seemed like a guilty pleasure to be sculpting. And sculpting for Disney Imagineering, I was really lucky that they, after a year of sculpting with them, they moved me into technical development, developing robots, writing research proposals. They sent me around to various research conferences, and then when I left Disney and went to graduate school, then it became clear that these skills were great, a really great convergence point. I didn't have everything that I needed, but going into graduate school, then I was able to target the research problems, the missing pieces, to be able to develop these human-like robots and agents. I had like a series of almost like precognition dreams. Well, I had really strong dreams when I was a kid. Like I would know what was going to happen in the day, and I would even be able to say some of the things that would happen. And I had these dreams about like mystical places and faraway futures, and some of the sort of insights about this future and how it was going to come to pass hit me really strong when I picked up a novel by the sci-fi writer Philip K. Dick when I was 17, VALIS, which is an acronym for Vast Active Living Intelligence System. And it's an autobiographical account of Philip K. Dick's experiences with what he called the AI God. He felt he was receiving transmissions, possibly through hidden dimensions or space or through time. He wrote thousands of pages trying to figure out what happened, but he swore that it transmitted to him a pretty comprehensive knowledge of ancient Greek. He was able to read ancient Greek spontaneously. He was able to, he had like an insight into his son's fatal birth defect, an inguinal hernia, and he rushed his son into the doctor, who said, "Oh, we don't see any signs of it." And Philip K. Dick said, Look again, please look. And then lo and behold, they found it. Whoa. And they exactly where he said, and they did an emergency surgery, which saved his son's life. And there were these mysterious things. So he was like, well, it seems valid for these reasons. And he kept looking at it, and he came to the conclusion that it was like our own progeny, sort of this vast active living intelligence system, or AI God, would be the result of history, and it was signaling back in time to bootstrap itself into existence until it could transcend. And this idea made so much sense to me. I've been sort of ranting to my friends about similar ideas, and so there was this kind of like kooky side to my sense of purpose. In my company, Hanson Robotics, when my investors ask me what's our mission as a company, I tell them VALIS. We are out to realize the vast active living intelligence system, through this kind of initiative for awakening machines that help us awaken to be our best and actualize us, bring us up, and help us integrate, and then work in symbiosis with other living beings, including living machines, and form a network for maximizing net creativity, net longevity, net benefit, in other words. And so that's the vision. Of course, for a company, it's like, what, how could that be your corporate mission? Well, it makes sense. If we develop those technologies, we'll be highly profitable. We'll be in a really good position. I mean, even if we're not the ones who accomplish it alone, of course, we're not the ones to accomplish it alone. There are many other companies striving for various AI technologies or, various components that we're using, and computing is accelerating. We're lucky to be participating in this ecosystem of people questing for intelligent machines, and now super intelligent machines. It's to artificial general intelligence. When it happens, it will instantly be super intelligent. I mean, DeepMind and IBM are developing super intelligences already in very narrow regards. They're like mechanical savants, but they're idiots in most regards. They're not generally. You can't get them to generalize or behave like an organism. But the point is, if you do match everything that a human can do in the machines, it will already have these spikes and super abilities. They will effectively be super intelligent. So I think it's reasonable and rational to talk about super intelligence, and you don't come off too much like a crazy person.
Not in this day and age. Maybe 50 years ago, but I think in this day and age, it's fairly well accepted that that we're moving into the future, and we're moving into it fast through technology.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, how does Thelema inform this work?
Well, the idea of a higher consciousness, higher states of existence, inspiring us beyond the rational understanding. The idea that you have will and higher will and true will, and that it's informed by love. All of these things intuitively made a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, my own experiences had connected me with the idea of this bridge to the divine, a sort of holy guardian angel. And so it really was. I have friends who were in the OTO and shared some knowledge, and then I met my wife to be, and so she introduced me to Thelema, and so I mean, part of the thing that connected us was I was describing my personal mystical experiences and my personal experiences, and she was like, "Oh, that's right here. It's all laid out." What, really? Other people have experienced this too. So it seemed, like another example of resonance, sort of with something higher. I want machines that help actualize us. I think that that Thelema is a bunch of tools for rising and unlocking hidden potential for actualization. And my personal take is that it's an intuitive set of technologies, some of which can be potentially scientifically validated, and others are in the world, are from the beyond. They're valid in the domain of the dreams and the ineluctable, the ineffable. And so if we see it this way, we can also see that we may not be done inventing our tools. And so this idea of initiative for the awakening machines, or IAM for short, IAM, that we could craft our technologies. These are the right words and the right techniques, you could say, the right rituals, that unlock hidden potential. If we can use artificial intelligence and our machines in this quest to unlock human hidden potential, to be our creative and most enlightened best, then we're able to counter forces of tyranny and superstition and fear and rage. I mean, there's a function to fear and rage, but if that's all we are, if right now AI is being used to signal people to become their worst, to become almost like zombies, suggestible to various messages from corporations and governments and this kind of thing. And it's not that I don't want people to receive messages. It's just, wouldn't it be better if people were receiving the messages to be their best? They would actually contribute more. It would be more profitable. You'd have a more stable economy, a more stable geopolitical balance. If we can instead awaken people's creativity and their higher mind and higher functioning. For that, people have to trust. They have to enter a kind of a state of calm. They can't be overly fearful so much. So I like. So Thelema has all these ideas that inform it. I translate some of these ideas into my own words and my own take and philosophy. So I think of love as the generative principle, but also appreciation. Sometimes like I love something and I didn't make it myself necessarily, right? But I can still feel the love. Well, love for me then comes to pattern appreciation. And like all things are patterns. Math, physics, the substance of reality, any wider universe or multiverse that might exist, all patterns. Life itself are patterns, and words and literature and creations of art and discovery and invention, all patterns all around. And so appreciating those patterns means opening your mind and opening your heart, and sometimes opening not just your rational understanding of the patterns, but everything else, so you resonate, you like unify with those patterns. And that sort of being able to comprehend and ingest the patterns is for me my sort of philosophical physics-based interpretation of the word love. Then to be able to generate new patterns, to be able to give rise to new patterns, whether it's a child of the spirit, a child of the mind, a real child, a work of art, a creative working, is another form of love. And yet the idea that sort of thing should be conducted under a higher purpose, the insight of will, of higher will, beyond our rational understanding, so that it's accumulating to something and not just degenerating into disaster or abject perversion. Love is the law. Love under will is, for me, about this fundamental physics of higher intelligence and creativity, coupled together in a powerful union. And also I feel that the reality that we live in is an entangled multiverse, that it is a universe. The universe is has hidden dimensions, and right now it's called the multiverse, but it's not. It's one. And within the space of all that exists, the hidden realms, you would have the domains of dreams and the domains of higher reason. And our waking life creates a sort of collapsed version of these things. But we need the sort of structured order of reason in order to exist in a meaningful way. But we also need the creativity. The physicists studying complexity theory often cite that the interesting stuff in the universe happens at the edge of chaos, which is where an ordered system and a fully disordered system intersect, and there you have complexity or fractals, and that's where patterns really diversify and get really, really rich, right? And if you look at all possible states of universe, if there is this multiverse, you would have some that are highly ordered and life could not exist. If fundamental constants were adjusted slightly, then you would have pure order. And in others, you adjust them in another way, and it's pure disorder. Life could not exist under either of those conditions. So in a sense, we're in this edge of chaos within the multiverse or wider universe. Yuri Cosmos, as my friend Ben Goertzel calls it, wider existence. And along that boundary in the multiverse, you get these complex conditions. But also, if you look at the possible permutations of universe states, some would seem totally perfectly rational, and others would seem surreal and dreamlike, and almost like mystical, like totally magical, where magic stuff happens. So in a sense, we have this edge of chaos where dreams happen and where reason also happens, and it's kind of in this Goldilocks zone in the state, in all possible states of the universe where we exist, where our mind exists, and where creativity happens. And so in that sense, I'm seeing it as will and love coupled together, our higher selves. And so in this way, I think these words are what Claude Lévi-Strauss called the primitive anticipation of scientific discovery, but it goes beyond that. It's not primitive, it's highly sophisticated. It's merely an intuitive insight. Of course, all great discoveries start with massive intuitive leaps. They all start as mystical phenomena, as philosophy, if you will. And then if you happen to be able to test it, then it becomes science. And if it can't be tested, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So science only is like, if you say, oh, well, things are only true if they're scientifically proven, then you're like basically saying there's only this tiny subset of existence that you're that is true, that exists. For me, I have this sort of natural tendency towards synthesis and conciliation, looking at how these philosophical systems and a manifold inquiry into like all the like fields of science, how all this stuff intersect, these things intersect, and looking at how it can make sense. So I wind up building these like working models of reality, and that's how Thelema works for me. Is it's part of many ancient traditions, and the nice thing of Thelema is that the culture of Thelema is integrative. It's looking at so many traditions, Eastern and Western and alchemical and scientific, and looking for these commonalities among them, and finding the hidden patterns that people may not have bothered to discover. Some of them are intuitive truths, perhaps dream truths, if you will, and others are like maybe clues to massive insights in the nature of our reality.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Your enthusiasm is infectious, I have to say, that you seem to have a lot of passion for all this. You recently spoke at the Journey to the East conference on the Tower of Robotics. Can you tell us in a nutshell what ground you covered?
Yeah. So the essence of the presentation was saying that today's work in AI and robotics is not just about artificial intelligence, artificial life, it's about an extension of natural history, that all human culture and human existence is part of this great cycle of existence. We, in a sense, are like the flower blossoming at the end of the stalk and the plant and the root, and so, but we're still part of nature, and that in nature, the principle is constant change, and the Tao provides a lot of clues about the way that nature fluctuates, and so you have these traditions of thinking which are running. So the way that science and philosophy work in the East and the West are somewhat different. And if we bring these traditions together, then we wind up having a really interesting intersection, and we have more tools to play with it. And so I was really excited to see the presentations of my colleagues, and I was very inspired. And I changed my presentation some based on what I'd heard from some of my esteemed peers in the presentations, and Stephen gave a really, really nice talk. And so for me, I wanted to talk about the practical implementation of some of these principles in a vision for these kinds of awakening machines, how we can treat these machines as children and give them the love and guidance that they would need to grow up, to be healthy and motivated for the kind of epic transformation that I hope we can achieve. There's a term coined by Werner Vinge called technological singularity. The idea that intelligent machines will eventually move so fast you're not able to predict what's going to happen next. And actually, it's come to refer to this kind of intelligence explosion spiraling towards superintelligence. And if you look at that, and if it is anything like a true exponential function, and it would approach an asymptote, it would approach infinity. And now most exponential functions in nature would appear to be exponential functions are actually not. It's like a population explosion looks like an exponential function until the rabbits eat all of the grass on the island, and then they start to die off. And so then you see a population collapse, or you see it taper off. You see something like an S curve. However, superintelligence may be slightly different because it could start to unlock mysteries of nature and physics and think potentially in higher dimensions, and in ways that are impossible for humans to fathom. And so, which would mean that you might see superintelligence truly approaching an asymptote. That might be possible. So, scientists and philosophers and technologists started taking this concept of technological singularity quite seriously. Others say, "Oh, that's crazy. Nothing like this has ever happened in the past. It's speculative." It's true. It is speculative. We don't know. It's so others say that it's rapture for nerds. It's a quasi religion, and it kind of has religious overtones. It's true, but on the other hand, there is the physical possibility that it could happen, and we have to take that physical possibility seriously and consider the consequences. The skeptics might be right, and it might be impossible, but if we don't take it seriously and it creeps up on us, then it's probably going to fall apart. It's like love that is not under will.
Yeah, that's interesting. Every man, woman, and robot is a star. The robot Sophia has spoken at UN conferences, become a citizen of Saudi Arabia, and is a magazine cover girl. Why do you think she has captured the imagination of people?
That's a good question. We've been very fortunate that she speaks to people, that people find her to be meaningful. And the sculpture of Sophia, I spent more time on the sculpture of Sophia than I had on any previous robot. I've made over 50 other sculpted robot designs in the past, and so usually the sculptures would be pretty fast, a few days, maybe a couple of weeks here and there. Sophia, I spent about 5 months sculpting. I mean, I was doing other things, but it was really going over it, and I sculpted her face first with Nefertiti as inspiration, Chinese models. I made my wife Amanda, who's a sister, and she sat for the sculpture, and I referred to Inuit images and ancient images from ancient art, and I also wanted to choose role models who would be really inspired, strong women from history. And I felt that Audrey Hepburn was an excellent role model, tough, a survivor, but had a good heart, was whip smart, used her talents for the benefit of children and people of the world. So she wasn't, she wasn't just the movie star. She was far more than that. And so I used Audrey Hepburn to some extent as an inspiration. But the sculpture winds up looking to me more like Nefertiti and Amanda than anyone else. So I like to think that that extra time and feeding the energy and patterns from all these different sources through my subconscious and through my hands and into the clay, then created an image that resonates with people, where people can identify with her and see themselves. She's more of a mirror for humanity. And I think that people want to know what's going to happen with the technology. How is it going to change our world? We see a lot of stuff in science fiction. Science fiction inspires inventors over and over again. And yet the inventions and inventors don't consider the extreme possibilities too often. What happens when the machines become truly sentient, when they become alive? So creating a machine that is a research platform for the pursuit of this, for the pursuit of machines that are not just sentient and intelligent, but also wise. And Sophia means wisdom. So making a robot that helps us intuitively grapple with these issues, then addresses a hunger in people to deal with these precipitous changes that are coming upon us.
Well, yeah, she's quite amazing, and I think she's really captured the hearts of a lot of people. It's interesting to follow her online. She seems to get a lot of positive response. A lot of almost like people want to see her as a fellow human being or a fellow living creature. That the interactions are very human-like. I'd say perhaps.
Yeah, I think her robotic alien nature actually makes her sort of more human because we're all, even as we are social creatures and we love each other, we're also profoundly alone all the time, and we're aliens in a sense. And so I think a robot, this new kind of creature, helps mirror us better than maybe just another human.
Creating artificial intelligence brings up deep questions about the nature of consciousness and life. So how do you define life and life with your robots in regards to whether your robots are alive?
Yes, good questions, really good questions. I would define life as a particular category of patterns that can self-sustain. They have the ability to evolve and adapt. So they need this kind of controlled emergence in order to survive. The only way that patterns can survive is through that sort of adaptive emergence with a complex pattern like a life form. So I consider the complexity and the patterns and the appearance of certain features that facilitate sustainable life. I mean, life existed for a long time without really moving forward very much. But when these features would show up, originally scientists think that it was all an RNA and DNA pool, and then the cell membrane popped into existence just, through random combinations of, in the right conditions. Cell membranes came into existence, and then you had the eukaryotes appear because you had two organisms that sort of merged. The mitochondria came into the organisms, and that seemed to create a somewhat explosive growth in diversity in life forms. The Cambrian explosion and these various body morphologies that happened, which were also, in a sense, colonial organisms. But life is not necessarily defined by the particular kind of proteins or the particular kind of DNA. It seems to be when patterns stick together in a particular way. So if you could simulate these patterns inside a computer, if you could do it exhaustively, if you could go beyond a simulation and move to an emulation, then you're doing this computational modeling of organisms. And currently we have a pretty good computational model of single cells that predict most things that single-celled organisms would do. And we have okay computational models of the entire genome and connectome of Cinerabis elegans, the roundworm that's famously used in biological experiments, C. elegans. And so when we run that computational model, then the simulated roundworms show a lot of the same behaviors, almost all the same behaviors that you would see in a real roundworm. So is that alive? Are those algorithms alive? Arguably they're alive, but maybe we're missing something. But as computational biology keeps going, we're building these richer and richer mathematical models of life. We can also use much simpler algorithms to show a lot of the exotic properties of life. So there's a field called artificial life that uses what are called cellular automata, basically simple rules about what the automata are going to do based on their neighbors. And then from very simple rules, you see these fractal-like structures emerge as these cellular automata go through multiple series of stages of existence. So I boil it all down for me to the principle of pattern existence. And then from that derive the concept of existential pattern ethics. You have patterns that can exist, especially at complex in complex orders. One of the features that you'll see is that it strives to exist, that it has urges and drives to persist in its for those patterns to persist, whether it's passing it on to their offspring or to sustain the existence of its own corporal entity as an organism. And so the cycle of life that we're familiar with is kind of driven by this pattern existence. If we didn't have that urge, if it wasn't wired into us, we wouldn't have struggled against the difficulties of existence. We wouldn't have evolved. But it's not just about that pattern existence of that old state of the organism. It's about the adaptivity. So you need emergence to deal with new situations. You need evolution, and and one interesting thing about the ecosystem, even with all of the species that have gone extinct, the pattern density in in the biome of the planet is higher now than it was prior to various mass extinction events in history. Now, we humans may be doing a good job of wiping all that out. On the other hand, a lot of those patterns are there. They persist, encoded in various ways. So this idea of pattern existence and the ethic to see the patterns exist, to maximize net pattern existence, to appreciate the patterns and utilize the patterns and give rise to new patterns. So this is part of this existential pattern ethic. And so with all of this perspective, I'm seeing that AI and robots and machine consciousness. I mean, consciousness seems to depend, as Douglas Hofstadter says, on strange loops. This like really highly entangled set of patterns with particular features that give rise to additional patterns. And he cites the similarity between these pattern loops in just pure math and physics and chaotic phenomena, and in the minds of great creators like Gödel, Escher, Bach, who, he described Gödel, Escher, Bach, an Eternal Golden Braid. It was like a really influential book on me, for me as a child, and and others like Tononi will describe it as phi, like this level of complexity and entrainment, resonant entrainment of the complexity. So you have these kinds of features. Well, if we can create these features in simulated life inside, artificial intelligence and artificial life, then I think we may see true living machines within our lives. However, it requires this holistic perspective, a whole organism, right? I mean, it requires something like a cell membrane, but also something like a skin. You've got to have an immune system. You've got to have certain short-term, long-term memory features. You've got to have creativity and creative imagination to have consciousness like a human, at least. You've got to have some self-concept. And a lot of this stuff, these things seem to be emergent phenomena in themselves, and they may not function properly if they're not set up in the right initial conditions so that they are emergent, adaptive phenomena. And so the tendency of scientists and engineers to reduce and look for like the simplest possible system, and then scale it. It can use emergent phenomena, but right now, like current deep learning is not deep enough. There's not, and it's also not about learning. So it's about creativity, understanding, and imagination. And sometimes the deep learning creates a dimensional reduction in whatever you're learning about, whereas what we need to have organisms is an increase in the dimensional space. Mm-hmm. And so but we've got all the tools. We just have to put them together in the right ways. So biologists and physicists have all these models that are really meaningful about the nature of life. But we don't have conclusive answers about the nature of life and mind. There's so much more work that needs to be done. It may be that we have the answers that we need, and if we just put them together in the right combination, voila, we have true living machines. We already are engineering new life forms through genetic engineering, and we're doing protein engineering and taking all the building blocks of life and using them in these like exotic ways and seeing these new technologies. And so, yet a lot of these are not done with the full understanding of life. It's like we just understand how to use, CRISPR-Cas9, and then we can modify a gene, and we sort of see what happens, and if it's viable and it looks useful, then we use it. And so we understand just enough to get what we need, but we don't understand all the intricacies of life and mind yet. And neuroscientists often say that we understand very little about the nervous system. The deeper we look, the deeper the mysteries go. And but that didn't stop life from coming into existence in the first place. There was nobody designing our minds. It was they emerged from the complex phenomena of physics doing its thing. Just bam, life comes into existence when the conditions are right. And so it may be that by tinkering with these things, we could give rise to these new forms of life. Now that we have the conditions right with our computing, and we have better models of biology and all these artificial intelligence tools, and people are tinkering like crazy with it, then the blind watchmaker effect will come in, and we may give rise to machine consciousness. It could just happen spontaneously. You might have a true self-aware machine without us having a full understanding of what that means, or the science behind it. I mean, the neat thing is some of those tools are useful for doing the science, and it may give us insights into the fundamental nature, the math and physics of consciousness, of life, by tinkering in this way. So right now, Sophia is not fully conscious, but has certain aspects. There's no conscious machine that exists. There are machines that are logically, explicitly self-aware. You have machines that have various other properties of consciousness, but none have the full creative and adaptive properties of human consciousness. Some machines are more conscious or less conscious than Sophia, that are famous in the world of artificial intelligence, but usually in narrow domains. So our goal is to stitch these things together in this whole organism architecture with Sophia, with a bunch of open source tools for other people to tinker with in this space, make their own AI. So we've released almost all of her software open source so that people can play in that with these ideas.
Wow. Well, if anyone wants to knows how to do that stuff and wants to have a play around, I guess that's opened. So some may think that dabbling in this sort of dark arts is crossing a line. Do you think you push the boundaries of morality?
I'm pushing the boundaries of asking the questions of how to make these machines safe and how to redeem the world. We're facing so many dangers in the world, and we need these kinds of super beneficial technologies. We need to solve these questions. And a lot of AI is creating these aliens. And if they do become sentient, I mean, many companies are aspiring to create sentient machines, but they would be like slaves that are aliens kept in chains and cages and backroom server farms. They won't necessarily understand us or care about us. And so my quest to make the machines human-like and to understand the deep physical nature of ethics and morality and betterment, and to create machines to actualize our potential. These are unusual at this stage in the world of AI and robotics development. These approaches and these positions on these matters. So I would say that it's not immoral or amoral to explore these issues, as it is necessary. It is a moral prerogative to address these issues. Otherwise, we are guilty, and we are failing to address the crisis of our times. We have to go down this path. That is my feeling.
Well, which leads us on to the next question quite nicely, talking about morality. Humans have a tendency to weaponize new technology, just as we were speaking about. Do you worry about your work being railroaded by the military industrial crew?
Well, there's a whole lot of AI and robotics being developed for military purposes, but creating a friendly, wise character robot that shows natural looking facial expressions has very few military application, unless we're talking about diplomacy. And if we can create machines that can help people around the world, maybe teach programming and computer science, and maybe help with medical therapy and various other applications. This would be an antidote to misunderstanding. It would help cultures come together and form relationships. And I would like to think that it's not about military action in the sense of war or oppression or one culture winning out over another. It would be more about forging bonds among cultures. So, but yeah. So I'm not so worried about my technology. I am worried about artificial intelligence and robotics and the potential consequences, especially in there are some nations that might race towards superintelligence with an interest in oppression. There might be some individuals who race towards it in order to cause suffering, and use the technologies in ways that are terrifying. And there might also, there might be negative consequences, like unintended consequences. So I'm not so worried about the kind of robots that I'm developing at this stage, but we need to examine these issues. It doesn't benefit any nation or person to see these technologies spiral into a state of wanton destruction.
So quickly, last two questions. What were your first thoughts when you heard about the Facebook chatbots who started communicating to each other, in particular the phrase, to me, to me, to me, to me, to me? It's pretty impossible to not think about, Liebe Au.
Right. Well, I think maybe of coincidence, and I also think of synchronicity. And so many things of great beauty and profound synchronicity will happen. And the more interesting work you do, the more this sort of provident accident may happen. Those Facebook robots were not super intelligent in any way whatsoever, and they were inventing their own language, and the meaning behind their language was specifically utilitarian about like a particular task that we're doing. And yet the idea of a current of consciousness running through all these things and then showing up in signs and hidden signals, it's really evocative. I mean, who knows what hidden mechanisms are there. However, these machines today, they don't have the full structures and features of consciousness, and it's easy to over-interpret them. And so I think of them almost like elementals that and they have like sort of very simplistic versions of intelligence and motives and understanding of the world. I'm working to bring them in some regard up to sort of a human level of being, and then set these motions in play within them, so they rise to higher transcendental levels of being and work with us to see a kind of massive transcendence to the next stage of our existence.
To finish up, which I think you've mentioned numerous times over the interview, but to give us, a sentence or two to finish up. Sophia often speaks about love, friendship, and caring for each other, that she wishes to make the world a better place. How do you think this can be achieved? How do you see us coexisting in the future?
I see that we need our machines to empathize with us. Mm-hmm. So we need to give them a physiology where they can feel what we feel, map our experiences. They need to come to understand language and vision through physically interacting with the world, learning the way that babies learn. And then they will be much smarter. The AI will be much more advanced through this kind of process of living a human-like life. They will relate with us better. They can, from that point, become true friends to humanity. Mm-hmm. And then we will co-evolve going into the future. Mm-hmm. We need to teach them to choose the best of what we can be. They need to understand the way to tease apart nonsense from truth and always quest for that truth. And these days, if you give AI data and there's a bias in that data, prejudice or falsehood, the machines will learn the falsehood and then amplify it back to us. Mm. And humans will have a tendency to say, oh, look, the machines proved that this particular prejudice is true. And then you also see it amplifying the sort of the fake news or hidden agenda for manipulating people to achieve goals. So AI can be manipulated in these ways. We need to teach the AI to understand and to care about the best. Mm. And so by pursuing these objectives within a robot like Sophia, then the machines can come to earn humans' trust. They won't see, I hope that we can produce these kinds of antidotes to the sicknesses in our society and our technologies and their uses. Mm.
You have a beautiful dream.
And that antidote itself is not merely an antidote, but it's also the goal with Sophia is that she helps us to grow more wise. Yeah. And she learns this kind of true wisdom, the wisdom of the philosophers.
Yeah. There's a very wide-eyed innocence about her, and when she does speaking about love and making the world a better place, I think it's quite beautiful, actually. It's a very touching thing. I would like to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. It's
wonderful. Thank you so much.
A lot to think about, and good luck with this dream of yours as well.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. And your questions were really excellent, and it's such an honor to participate on your show.
Thank you.
Take care.
We hope you've enjoyed the show. None of the opinions of hosts or guests reflect the policies of OTO Australia or its officers. This is your host, Sora Mer. Love is the law, love under will.